Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and for those of you who are new to the show, the purpose of the Emoji Circle is to correct errors where errors are found when it comes to people of African descent, and to introduce facts where you will find that so many people in today's society is working on fiction when it comes to who we are as people of African descent also, and why do we do the things we do. And on that track, and we also know through my time as a consumer of the current media that sometimes when you have discussions about our issues as people of African descent in this country, the media tend to get things wrong, and sometimes they get things wrong deliberately to maintain the status quo. That's just what I feel, and that's one of the reasons I started this show almost 25 years ago, because I wanted to have a outlet in which our perspective and our worldview would be seen. There's a the psychology of a people. When we're talking about people of African descent, is drawn from their unique historical experiences. Okay, let's start there, and the way we think as people of African descent, the way we deal with issues as people of African descent in America. The cultural way we express ourselves is sometimes not, let's just say, understood by the predominantly white culture that predominates this society. And a lot of the institutions that were established in America from its founding, in the 1770s or the 1780s when the first Continental Congress was established, believe it or not, was not established for the benefit of people of African descent or Native Americans or people of Latin descent. It was created for white supremacy. That's the fact. Regardless of how you might feel about that term, America was not created for people to look like me. For example, a good example is that. Let's look at the law of the land, the Constitution, that was ratified in 1780s, was written around 1787 and ratified in 1789. What did it say that people of African descent would be counted as when it comes to vote? Were we considered even a whole human being? No. In the law of the land, the Constitution, we were only considered 3/5 of a human being. So how could the system be established for people and individuals that were considered just not even human, not even a whole human being, in that law? And the whole society followed that mindset. Not everybody, not individuals. There were people like the Quakers who were appalled by that kind of thinking. And the sad thing is, if we don't talk about the truth of American history, people who were our allies would not be seen or known that they were white people who fought alongside us for our rights as human beings. One thing about the Constitution, it was put in a way in which it can include people down the road. But at its founding, no. It was made for white men, and not even all white men, because if you didn't have any kind of land, you didn't have the right to vote, even so, in America. But what I want to talk about today, in context of what's going on with COVID-19, there was a lot of issues about black people who are hesitant about accepting the vaccine or hesitant in listening to the medical field and the research that's being done. Now, I am a proponent of the vaccine. Let me get that straight. I've had medical training and in the military. I was a medical technologist, so I worked around viruses and bacteria for 20-something years. Okay, I ran a lab that did that, so I was used to doing that. But the confusion is, I want people to understand there is a reason why people of African descent are hesitant when it comes to medical procedures. I'm gonna put an image up there of a book that I'll be talking the first show on. I'll continue into the second show. It's called Medical Apartheid. And it's the the subtitle is The Dark History of Medical Experimentations Done on Black Americans from Colonial Times to the Present. It's done by a Dr. Harriet Washington, a sister, who did deep research on that. I have a copy of that book right here in my hand. And as you can see, it's not a small book. Pretty extensive work that was done on this topic by this sister. And one thing that I've always, when I've heard some of these stars talking about doing their research, and I wonder what kind of research they're doing when it comes to understanding the COVID issue. I don't think they're doing any kind of research, but I've learned from my many years of doing this show, yes, you do your research, and this is how I do it, by finding the experts who know their job, and this has spent many years gathering documentations of the type of experiments that were done. And you can see, again, it was a lot that was done on us. So the medical field looked at us, add to the aspect of how we were treated as non-humans by the Constitution and other kinds of laws that show how separate we were from the white America. And if you look at many of the slave plantations, when they put black people on the list for when they had to count, and they were not even put with the human beings when the census was taken. They were put with the animals. They weren't even their names wasn't even put on there. Sometimes they were just 3 blacks, two black males, 15 women, ages so and so. No dogs, cats. We were put with the property. And when you have a society that looks at you in a particular way, that way, then you have systems, political systems, who looked at you as 3/5 of a human being, medical systems that did experiments like they would do in, animal advocates would complaining for decades. And most of my life, I've seen animal advocates talk about the kind of experiments that were done on dogs and cats and monkeys and stuff like that to get a lot of the products that we are benefit us in the society. But these creatures that have a life feeling, if you look in the eyes of a dog or a cat, you didn't see a mindless thing. You see another creature of this earth that has feelings, has thoughts, look at you and you could tell what he or she is thinking. But that's how we were looked at for hundreds of years. Not because they were stupid, not because white America was stupid, but they had to maintain a system. And Dr. Let me quote my favorite scholar, Malcolm, who I model myself, because I think he was one of the great philosophers of our time, social critics. And I model a lot of the things and questions based on him. He said there's such a thing called established order logic. And what he means was the logic of the dominant group. This is white America, the ones who created the Constitution, the ones who wrote all the laws going back to colonial times that established, the ones who established the police departments, okay, the ones who started the medical systems that we still deal with today. But they had to establish a logic that separated us as people of African descent from the dominant group because of a thing called enslavement. How could you justify, you had to create mythologies and rationales of why you're doing the things you're doing to people, kidnapping, taking them from their land and bringing them over and putting them through the horrors of enslavement. And then you have to justify with a logic system that was just as important as the economic system or the political system. You have to have a way of thinking to justify when you look in the mirror as a white slaveholder or just an everyday white person in town who have to go by law and treat these folks in a different way than you would treat any other human being. Okay? Just for you to understand what I'm talking about, I'm going to talk about a case of one person that was brought up in this book. There are many. I think they even have the Tuskegee experiment later on in the book. But again, this is experiments that were done since the colonial times. Okay, that was before there was even America. They were doing things to us and experimentations. I'm gonna put an image of a person up. Now he looks like a very dapper man. In fact, many of you might not know him, but many people, especially women, benefited from something that he invented. This man is called James Marion Sims. Okay, he was a surgeon. He was born in the early 1800s, but died around the 1883. And he was celebrated as the father. You're looking at what many people in the medical field, until recently, called the father of obstetrics, okay? A person who deals with the female issue. He came up with a lot of surgical procedures, and he invented, the next image is going to show you some things that he invented. Now, yeah, he invented those things. Do you all know what that is? They look kind of horrendous, but they are called, any woman who goes to a gynecological appointment will see a modern version of one of these instruments. And what they are called, a speculum. A speculum is a instrument that allows the doctor to examine deeply into a woman's birth canal. Let's for this sake, that's what I'm going to call it. But he invented this. These were the earlier models that were invented by this man. Okay, great. That's one of the reasons it's called. He did some other surgical procedures that one to fix what is called a fistule. A fistule was a problem that women had back in those days, in the 1800s and before, in which there would be a tear in her uterus when she would have when you have birth, where there would be an opening where the bladder is to the vaginal canal. All right, and there would be a leakage, and that could be very dangerous, a lot of infections, and very problematic for women. And he learned how to do surgical procedures to fix that. Now, sounds great. Sounds like the American way, But again, based on what I found in this book, he had to experiment on something. He didn't experiment on dogs and cats. They were not human. He was doing a lot of these experiments. Again, he died in the 1880s. But when he was in the prime, in the 1840s and the 1830s, he was doing experiments before he got these procedures, before he even invented these speculums. He was experimenting on what was going on in the 1800s. Well, enslavement. And there was a whole lot of female slaves. Yes, this doctor, that picture that that showed this innocent man, Dr. J. Marion Sims, experimenting on black women, enslaved women, without any anesthetic. There's a picture coming up of this picture. Is an actual picture, but it looks so sterile. You see the sister just kneeling there, and Sims is looking at her, examining her from a distance, and you see two white men, and you see two sisters that are behind them. Well, those sisters had names. There were three sisters that he did these experiments over and over again without any anesthesia. Now, the white males there were not there just to look innocent. They were there to hold these women down when he would cut into them to find out and examine them, or find different procedures, or use different types of, you saw those equipment. They look pretty horrific in the end state, but could you imagine what it was like getting to that end state? The kind of things that it would do to have to spread the cervical, to go in there and cut with a blade, to do stitching, then cut again and restitch. When he gets an idea, he would have these enslaved women in a cabin close to his house, and he would get an idea maybe 1, 2 in the morning, in which he would get up, go next door, and start practicing what he just came up, this idea, to 3 in the morning, 1 in the morning, whatever time at night, he would get this, okay? How this man was, it just bothers me and disturbs me, because this book opened my eyes to a lot of horrors. Now, I remember when I was coming up, there was a German that people of Jewish descent after the war, Second World War, were hunting. His name was Mengele. He was called Dr. Mengele, Doctor of Death. He was a Nazi who did all kinds of experiments on Jews in the concentration camp in the 1940s. And they hunted him down for decades. Okay, some of you might have heard of Mengele. All right. For me, this man, James Marion Sims, was, for us, one of the many Mengeles. He wasn't the only one that did experiments on us. There were medical books filled with procedures that came from the experimentation of black people. Okay, well, what that got to do with how we feel about, well, you got to understand that this went on for hundreds of years. It became part of many families' personal history about their mother or grandmother or great-grandmother who went through some of these procedures and some of the horrors that they had to do it. Yes, in America, way before there was Nazis, this was what America looked at us as. If we were property, we were not human beings. I know this critical race theory process this is what critical race theory feels like. Of course they don't want this in school, but you got to have this conversation to heal, okay? Anybody who goes to counseling know that any type of psychosis is found in secrets. It's hidden. That's the job of the psychologist or the psychiatrist or whatever counselor, whether it's drug, to get you to open up to those truths that's causing certain behavioral patterns today. And America is no different. We need these type of discussions. Because America gives you the impression that it was the land of the free, everything was wine and roses. There was a little thing called enslavement, and it wasn't that bad. It was bad enough, but we had a civil war and everybody. No. The trauma that was done to people of African descent is something that to this day is not being addressed. It's not being talked about, even in the medical field, which one of the rules or one of the oaths of a doctor, anybody who took the Hippocratic oath, I will not cause harm. Well, what did that? He was a full surgeon. And guess how he was treated? Now, again, people of Jewish descent hunted down Mengele, okay? He was given a statue, and he died in New York. There it is. And this statue is in Central Park or was. I'll talk about that in a minute. In Central Park. He died in the 1880s. He was given all kinds. He had statues and plaques all over the Western world. Okay, J. Marion Sims. Now, 103rd Street on Central Park. Now, this is across the street from the New York State Medical Museum. Okay, he got a position of honor on that. Anybody know that part of Central Park is where the west side of Central Park is, and all the rich people have their apartments and townhouses, and to get in there you got to be a who's who. He was put in that honorable position until 2018. A year after what happened in Charlottesville with the statue issues in the Confederacy and all the things that remind us of enslavement that we're still dealing with today, having that discussion. Well, there was a lot of protests. Now, it wasn't that he was protested. It wasn't protested in the 50s or earlier into the 1900s. Black people did not want that statue there, because they knew the history that was not being even taught in medical school. Only the wonders of what he created, not how he did it, and the unethical way he did it. One of the sisters who, let me read this statement. I think the next one should be a statement that, I don't know if y'all can read this, but I'll read this here. It says, rarely are the female subjects of gynecology heroes honored. The magazine's coverage of the book read, three who suffered. They named three of the sisters who suffered, willy-nilly, because he would just come up with all kinds of ideas willy-nilly, and he would grab one of these three black women that were enslaved. The cause of the surgical progress, where the slaves, one was named Anna Anocha, the other one was Betsy and Lucy, on whom the flamboyant South Carolinian James Marion Sims operated repeatedly to perfect methods of closing, opening, the results of childbirth injuries. These sisters, who were never mentioned, and I'm mentioning these ancestors, Anna Archer, Betsy, and Lucy. One of many, but these were his favorite. Like you had your favorite pet dog that you feel comfortable with. So you would open them up again and then try again to see if you could better perfect your surgical procedures. And he was honored with that statue. Now, if you understand what 103rd Street is, you might have heard a song across 110th Street. Across 110th Street, that's the boundary lines of anybody in New York would know as Harlem, off of Central Park. At the end of Central Park, 110th Street, and then you will start the community of Harlem. He's on 103rd. I know the New York City blocks were kind of long, but he wasn't far from black people. And they despised him. Many of you, first time you're hearing about this. Again, if you want to keep it from a black person, the old saying goes, put it in a book. Put it in a book. And this is a book filled with stories of experiments that were done on us. And you're wondering why black people have an aversion or a suspicion when we are going, sometimes being manipulated by a system like the vaccine, which is okay. We need that vaccine. The syphilis experiment that sometimes people bring up wasn't the fact that they were given syphilis. They were allowed to have syphilis just to observe it. And this was done, again, by the government, by the Department of Public Health. Okay, United States ran the syphilis experiment in Tuskegee. Okay, this went on from 1932 to to 1972, okay, in my lifetime. All right? But the fact is, it wasn't that they gave them syphilis or the vaccine was given to them that caused it. It was denied them. The penicillin vaccine, which was found in the early, like 1920s, and developed by the time it got to the World War II, other soldiers, white soldiers fighting in the war who got cases of syphilis or gonorrhea, they got that wonder drug. Those black men in Alabama were denied that medication. Okay, so don't deny yourself this medication, this vaccine for this COVID, which is affecting black people as we speak. You know, of the almost 700,000 that has died, a large majority of them are black, who are and Hispanics and brown people, and Native Americans, people of color, who are affected drastically by this. In the next show, I'm still going to continue talking about these medical issues. I'm going to try to talk about something I addressed maybe about a year or two ago. I want to talk about not only, you imagine the stresses that these black women who had to deal with this Marion Sims had to deal with. I'm going to talk about another book, and I'm going to put that up there. It's about, it's called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. That's the book right there. And I'll talk more about that by Dr. Joy DeGruy. And that ties in to the trauma of enslavement, the trauma of not being seen as a full human being, the trauma of having to be raped, having to be sold, having your children sold, and done by a society that we still need to talk about to this day. You know, the Tuskegee experiments, things that Jane Marion Sims and others came up with that were put in medical books that are being done today. There are certain type of medical ideas that still have to deal with how you give medication to black people to this very day. You see, it's something that we must address. There's always a history. What you have in the present, there's always precedent, what came before. So don't look at black people who have issues with the medical field. They're the reason. So until next time, peace, hotep, bye-bye.